Podcast Bites.
Until a person actually knows how to access their soul, they can't tell the difference between their soul and their mind. And the mind is actually inherently part of the soul. So the soul is not as simple as people think. The soul's got levels to it. Without giving you a long expose of the soul, but in a nutshell, I use Steiner's model of the soul because I found it to be very complete. Steiner says anything with an inside and an outside has a soul, which begins at an atom. So in Steiner's model, souls have atoms, and anything that is not biological, like a plant or a living organism or a human being, has a mineral soul. So his class, the soul begins as a mineral soul on this planet. Then, through the process of biological life, everything that emerges from the mineral kingdom, i.e., single-celled organisms, for example, in the ocean, have a biological soul. So the biological soul now is not only regulating energy and information in form. A rock has form, the planet has form, sodium chloride is a molecular combination of atoms that makes sodium chloride, right? So there you see there's form. That's why you can recognize the sodium chloride molecule, and chemicals can give you, a chemist can draw it out for you. But then you go to the biological soul, and so each level of the soul gets more complex, and it can transfer more energy and information because it's actually beginning to have a more comprehensive, shall we say, thinking process. Awareness process would be a more accurate term. Even a single-celled organism has awareness of what it wants to eat and what it needs to survive, so it moves towards food. If you look at basic biological texts, they say a cell moves towards pleasure and avoids pain, and pleasure is the right temperature or the right environment for it to thrive, and pain is anything that threatens its survival. And so that's the very basis of our what's called the negative bias, which is our nervous system's constant looking for threats in the environment, because at the biological level, that's a reality for survival. So the biological soul then evolves in the human being and in some primates and dolphins and whales and creatures that have enough brain power to the intellectual soul, which is then the soul's growing its own mind. In other words, a plant is fused in what's called a group soul. Most animals are in a group soul. So there's like the soul of all lions is guiding all the lions. A lion doesn't have an individual sense of self like you or I do. All lions have this very same desires and drives, and they don't have personality biases. In other words, they don't have egos. Mm-hmm. They have the ego of the animal itself, but that's part of the group soul because it's living through all the lions. You could find a correlate for that in the human being, but it would just be a correlate because we all have egos and a sense of individuality. And you can tell that we have that because we do things that are destructive to ourselves. You don't see lions, for example, shooting up crack or killing so much that there's nothing to eat one day, right? They're very tuned, and they're actually part of nature. So
there's a symbiosis.
There's a symbiosis, mm-hmm. and they don't go against that because it's inherently woven into the fabric of lionness, just like wolves and birds and bees have birdness and beeness. But if you give a human ego to any one of those creatures, it all of a sudden can start doing things that are very destructive to itself and to life itself, because it doesn't really have a context for determining, neither do humans at lower levels of consciousness, when it's actually destroying its own survivability, right? So the intellectual soul is really the beginnings of an ego. And the intellectual soul means any idea that the person can access and use or remember. So all of our childhoods are the beginning. From the very time we emit the word I or no, that's when the ego is forming. that shows that the child is now differentiating itself from mother, father, food. If mommy sticks a fork in the child's mouth with roast beef and it doesn't want it, it'll say no and push the hand away. It's now aware for the first time that it is not the roast beef and it is not mommy, and it can have a choice, so it pushes it away. That's the beginning of the intellectual soul. Prior to that, it's a biological organism, so it lives like an extension of its mother.
Avocado, motherfucker.